Welcome back to our Healing Life series. This is where we take a deep dive into you, me, and us, and our genius. So we're micro-learning and practicing with ideas and tools that we all need to heal. So let's pick up from where we left off last time when we explored how the core resilience factors are the most crucial part of the healing roadmap that we use to construct our process to reach our highest potential and solve our multitude of problems. So remember, 99% of what ails us can be completely resolved by tending to core resilience. And the other 1%, that's where we're going today. The complex roadblocks to healing. That's the other part of our healing roadmap. Let's quickly review. So we have a healing terrain. These are the core elements that together establish the dynamic equilibrium that leads to us and all the structure and function that makes us us. That healing terrain that makes us us is comprised of the gene, environment, lifestyle, life event, mindset, dynamic, relationship, okay? And then we have a healing roadmap that helps us navigate that healing terrain. Recall the two overarching themes of the healing roadmap that apply to all human beings and how we navigate and direct the healing terrain. First is to create core resilience, and that's what we dove into last time. And second, resolve complex roadblocks to healing. So last time we explored the core resilience and the foundational daily practice that will lead to our healing 99+% of the time. And we defined resilience as strength plus energy plus adaptability. Resilience is having the strength, energy, and adaptability to successfully manage all life's challenges. And we explored the 8 core resilience domains. Presence, which includes developing self-awareness, self-compassion, and safety and self-agency to become our witnesses. Letting go of toxins, irritants, and negative energy. Love and connection with yourself and others. Balance to establish a strong center and create stress resilience. Restore, sleep to sleep well, rest and play. Move to move vigorously and carry yourself well. Nourish, all about eating to support energy, vitality, structure, function. And then flow, tapping into the emotional authenticity and guidance of each one of us. So today, we're going to explore the second overarching theme of our healing roadmap, to resolve complex roadblocks to healing. And as I said before, the complex roadblocks to healing will have most likely had their genesis in unmet needs and imbalances of core resilience. But they've become so entrenched and complex and have led to such overwhelming dysfunction as to need more than the usual interventions to resolve. They need deeper medicine to jumpstart the healing process. And for these complex roadblocks to healing, you may need a guide, someone who is highly trained and skilled to think broadly about your system's biology and the body-mind-spirit integration of you, who understands the terrain deeply, and at the same time can dive deeply with you into the details of what your body says it needs, who can help you decode the language of your body and help guide you on a path to healing, your healing. So, how do we look at the complex roadblocks to healing? I like to divide them into 2 categories to help me think about my complex clients and to keep us organized in our approach. You'll see a great deal of overlap between these. And you'll also recognize how many factors from both categories will occur simultaneously to contribute to pain, suffering, and illness. So first, and this is just showing, this is our roadmap. This is the core resilience that we discussed last time. And today we're talking about resolving the complex roadblocks to healing. And first we've got internal barriers to healing. So this is how I organize the complex roadblocks to healing. So the internal barriers consist of unmet needs that need to be resolved. And then we have external barriers to healing. Okay? And these are usually harmful exposures that need to be removed. So on the one hand, we want to identify and bring in what the body needs, right? On the other hand, we want to identify and remove what is doing the body harm. So let's look at some of the more common examples of internal and external barriers to healing, okay? Now, there's a lot here, okay? There's a lot of content here, and there's a lot that needs to be considered when evaluating somebody who we suspect has complex barriers to healing. And I'm not going to create a exhaustive list. I just want to review them briefly. Just let these wash over you and don't feel like you have to, sink your teeth into all of them. We're going to be getting into these in more depth at a later time. So for internal barriers to healing, again, these are unmet needs that must be resolved. And these are some examples of what I'm talking about that I see very commonly in my own clients. Nutrient deficiencies, macronutrients, micronutrients, phytonutrients, okay? Nutrients run all the business of the body, okay? Hormone, peptide, neurotransmitter deficiencies. And these usually relate back to nutrient deficiencies. And sometimes we're dealing with essential cell, organ, or tissue dysfunction, like kidney or liver disease, microbiome imbalances, and we now know that the microbiome, it's the microorganisms that live on all of our barrier surfaces, right? Our mucosal surfaces, the gut, the skin. We have more microbial cells than we do our own cells. They're part and parcel of all of our function. They're incredibly important for every aspect of health. So we commonly see microbiome imbalances, immune imbalances, either overaction or underaction, sleep insufficiency, length, depth, quality, circadian rhythm, breathing patterns, movement and posture lack or excess, lack of love or connection, loneliness, lack of support, feeling unsafe, disconnection from self, lack of self-awareness, self-compassion, safety, or self-agency. So there's no anchor, no director. You're just blowing in the breeze. A persistently negative mindset, one that's despairing or lacks hope or is filled with disempowering stories. Unresolved trauma, emotional repression, persistent anxiety or depression, harmful narratives, poor stress resilience, persistently high feelings of stress, overwhelm, lack of support or coping skills. Those are some examples of internal barriers to healing that need to be solved. Okay, what about the external barriers to healing? Let me give you some examples. So these are harmful exposures that need to be removed. Environmental toxins and irritants, glyphosate, heavy metals, mold toxins are common. Immunological activators such as microbes, foods, allergens, toxins. Negative energy, noise, people, UV radiation, electromagnetic radiation. Unsafe environments, violence, extreme poverty, homelessness, harmful addictions, alcohol, drugs, overwork, and these overlap with unresolved trauma and poor stress resilience. Distraction, distracted driving, clutter, excessive multitasking, news and social media overconsumption. Okay, so in my work with clients with chronic complex problems, I assess them for all of these internal and external barriers to healing. And there's usually a constellation of barriers to work on. I ask about everything that we just reviewed in my initial intake questionnaires, and we focus extensively on those barriers to healing that are made obvious by how my client tells their story. And my experience has been, and there's also been there's been evidence, there have been studies published in the medical literature that show that over 99% of the time, the answers we're looking for are in the story. They're not in our fancy tests. Okay? So the story is so important. Testing is selected judiciously to further elucidate the problem and provide guidance about what we need to do next. But the tests are not the story. So we don't willy-nilly test everyone for everything. And why not? Well, tests can be great, but they're far from perfect. They're not a substitute for careful listening and organizing the story. Tests often provide misleading information, or they miss things entirely. It is a mistake to hang your hat on any test. We always treat the person, and often with no testing at all. So let me give you an example of how tests are helpful. Someone with severe fatigue will almost always have deficiencies of nutrients that are involved in energy production. I mean, always. But which ones? There are many nutrients derived from the food that we eat that play a role in some aspect of energy production, from mitochondrial nutrients involved in electron transport, which is how energy is made within the mitochondria in the cells, to the nutrients that support function of the thyroid and the adrenal glands, which are involved in regulating energy production. Or someone who's clearly suffering from a toxic exposure, who has multi-system problems with fatigue and neurological deficits. Which toxins are we dealing with? Sometimes the symptoms are very similar. Or is it more of a problem with how their body is able to clear those toxins? We need a lot of information to robustly support them and lead them to wellness. So how do we navigate all these potential barriers to healing when it's clear someone's suffering goes beyond core resilience factors? Well, first we breathe. That list can be completely overwhelming. Pain, suffering, and illness can be completely overwhelming. And then, remember, where did we start in this series? We make the body right. We use our skills of presence to be our witnesses, and we carefully observe and listen to the language of the body. What do I mean by language of the body? What do you observe when you check in with yourself? And here's where your homework comes in, when you're trying to solve your own problems. I count on you to provide me with as much detail in your story and as much context about your terrain as possible. And how do you do that? Well, first, circle the wagons around your problem. What do you feel? What's the sensation? Where is it in your body? How do you describe it? How has it changed? What is the timeline for what you've experienced? When did it start? When did you last feel well? Then what? So spend some time carefully developing your observations about what you've been experiencing. Carefully craft a detailed timeline of your health and major life events. Begin at birth. Fill in all the blanks you can think of to bring us to present time. This is the language of your body and the context of your healing terrain. And it may seem cryptic. It may completely befuddle and overwhelm you. And this is where I, or your trusted healthcare partner, can help you, to help you be your witness, to help you decode the language of your body. So let's consider an example. I have a client I'll call Anne, which is not her real name. She came to me about 5 years ago, very ill, and a complete mystery to her doctors, who told her they didn't know what was wrong. Anne had become suddenly ill 5 years before our first visit. Her primary symptoms were exhaustion, poor exertion tolerance, brain fog, severe vertigo, insomnia, migratory joint and muscle pain, hyperacusis, which is hypersensitivity to sound. Sounds sounded louder than they actually were, daily headache, cognitive dysfunction, and migratory nerve pain throughout her body. She was told that she had fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome. She knew better. And I consider both of those diagnoses to be descriptive only. They both represent a foundational energy deficit in the body, and both diagnoses are used extensively when doctors can't figure out what's wrong. So after exploring her detailed story, we began to figure some things out. Here's an overview of some of the things that we found. Okay, so internal barriers to healing, her unmet needs. She had some severe nutrient deficiencies, protein, fats, micronutrients, phytonutrients. She had immune imbalance, excessive inflammation in the setting of immune deficiencies. She had multiple hormone deficiencies, estradiol, cortisol, aldosterone, thyroid. She had microbiome imbalance, sleep insufficiency, the timing, depth, length, movement insufficiency, and postural problems from excessive sitting, unresolved trauma, becoming very sick and vulnerable with doctors, including specialists, unable to help her, right? Disconnection from self, hopeless mindset, high stress. She was a primary care provider for an autistic son. Then we looked at external barriers to healing, harmful exposures. She had a persistent infection with Borrelia burgdorferi, Bartonella quintana, and Babesia, 3 tick-borne illnesses, the cause of her acute illness 5 years ago. Exposure to environmental toxins. She lived on a farm, exposed extensively to farm chemicals. Exposure to mold toxins, food sensitivities, negative energy in the form of toxic family relationships. So, needless to say, there was a great deal for us to do, and we obviously couldn't do it all at once. That would have been way too overwhelming. Some of these dysfunctions were likely present before she became ill, 5 years prior to my meeting her, and they acted as antecedents that made her more vulnerable to becoming as ill as she did. Some of the unmet needs were basic core resilience factors, but in this setting, at this particular time, her situation had obviously become quite complex and entrenched. We had to get her well enough and to get quickly enough to give her hope about the future and to support her ability to function in her daily life. So we started with aggressive support of her foundational physiological needs, particularly energy and detoxification, and we removed critical external barriers to healing. So we improved her sleep. We addressed all nutrient deficiencies through diet and supplements. We removed irritant foods from her diet. We supported detoxification to help her clear environmental mold and microbial toxins. We supported her microbiome and gut function. We restored hormones to physiological levels. And we began treatment for Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia with careful titration over time of multiple antibiotics and immune therapies. We supported clearance of inflammatory cytokines and microbial die-off products. In addition to all this, we reconnected her to herself by working on self-awareness, self-compassion and safety, and self-agency. And we gently got her moving and addressed special postural needs through physical therapy. We found ways to relieve excesses of stress from her everyday life and worked on strategies to set strong boundaries with some of the toxic family members. She continues to be a work in progress, but she spends most of her time virtually symptom-free at this point. We have tried unsuccessfully to wean her off her antibiotics and immune support. Some of her more debilitating neurological symptoms recur when we try to reduce doses. So it's not a story with a perfect ending, which is why I told it, because no story really ever is. But we don't make her body wrong. We don't predefine an absolute trajectory for her healing. We let her healing unfold, and we learn as we go. It's about healing, not perfection. So she functions at an extremely high level while taking antibiotics to keep Lyme, Bartonella, and Babesia at bay. I'd like to think that we will eventually restore her immune system to take care of all these organisms without needing the support of antibiotics. However, as the mother of a severely autistic son and with a unique constellation of physiological challenges, including high sensitivity and exposure to environmental toxins, we are both ecstatic with what we've been able to accomplish so far, and our work will continue. But in essence, if you asked her, she would say she's healed in profound ways she never dreamed possible. So this is a success story. All right, let's take a time out. Today, we'll take just a few minutes to work on loosening our stories to allow the healing to come in. So what am I suggesting here? You know this. Some of our stories get in our way. Some of our stories are just bad stories that we adopted from our tribes, our culture, our families of origin. You know, like, you can't do that. You'll never be X, Y, or Z. Who do you think you are? And some of our stories are fear and trauma-based. They may have kept us safe and alive at one time in our lives, but now they hold us back. I'm a sitting duck. All I can do is wait for the experts to come and save me, to fix me. I am helpless, right? What do we do with our disempowering stories? First, we have to be our compassionate witnesses. We have to develop an awareness of what our stories are. And make no mistake, everything we think we know is a story. And every story, especially those we identify as the truth and how things are, demands our scrutiny if we value the truth of who we are. And we deserve our own compassion. We must acknowledge how we've always done our best. Our survival was worth it. We did what we had to do, but now we're moving on. So let's stand tall and proud and in our strength, feet on the earth, a bit greater than hip distance apart. Place your hands firmly over your core of cores, one over your solar plexus and just below the ribs, and one over your heart center. So this is us in present time. This is our strength. This is our love. Breathe into your core of cores and let it soften. Soften your face, soften your shoulders, soften your jaw, soften your thoughts. And as you breathe and create space through your softening, stay curious. Let every breath, sensation, feeling, and thought flow on by as you gently, softly watch with curiosity. And let's use our powerful words. I am an amazing vessel of human biology, emotional genius, and spiritual creation. My body is all wise. I may hurt and suffer, but I trust my body's wisdom. I may feel overwhelmed and confused, but I trust my body's innate impulse to heal. I release the stories that get in the way of my healing. I release the stories that say I can't, or it's too hard, or I'm too complicated, or I don't have time. I release the stories that lock me in, that tease me with the lie of certainty, because I know nothing is ever certain. Absolute truth and certainty are the fiction of the traumatized brain. These don't serve me or my healing. I go forward as my compassionate witness in courageous uncertainty. I soften my fear. I unleash my curiosity to discover the lessons and wisdom embedded in my pain, suffering, and illness. I forgive myself. I forgive all others. I allow myself to heal in my messy, yet beautiful and extraordinary human way. Amen. Thank you for being a part of my journey. Thank you for being here. I look forward to seeing you next time. Not quite sure what we're going to dive into next, but we're going to continue the story of our healing. Thank you.